In this section, I'm going to start with talking about implementing Azure Identity, also known as Azure Active Directory. This section is again split up in multiple topics, where the first one will be about deploying Azure Active Directory, followed by what it takes to integrate your on-premises Active Directory with Azure AD. And then talking more about Azure Active Directory advanced features, talking about integrating Azure Active Directory with public SaaS applications, and ending this section talking about Azure Application Proxy. So let me start with the first one, deploying Azure Active Directory. I'm going to cover a couple of topics here. First of all, explaining what is Azure Active Directory. What are the different versions that are available today? And then zooming in a bit more on specific Azure Active Directory features like domain services and Azure Active Directory B2B and B2C. And then ending this part of the video explaining and showing you what it takes to deploy Azure Active Directory. Now let me start with describing what Azure Active Directory is. Azure Active Directory is a multi-tenant, cloud-based directory and identity management service. It provides you single sign-on access to thousands and thousands of cloud SaaS public SaaS applications, including, for example, Office 365, Dropbox, Salesforce.com, and obviously a lot of other ones. It provides multi-factor authentication, device registration, so you can secure your mobile devices. It provides self-service password management and role-based access control, one of the features that I also covered at the beginning of this course when talking about Azure Resource Groups. And not to forget, it provides rich auditing, security monitoring, and alerting. So if we take a look at it from an architectural perspective, there was an interesting image available on the Microsoft website. So I can quickly describe what's going on from an architectural perspective. So on the left-hand side, we have Windows Server Active Directory, or if you want, even other directories like Samba emulated Active Directory, Oracle Directory, and so on. On the right-hand side, we have public cloud SaaS applications like Facebook, Twitter, Dropbox, and all the other ones we have available. Now, to make sure that our on-prem users can authenticate against those public cloud applications, we have two options. The first one is using a natively configured user account for that specific public cloud application, like Facebook.com user account. Another approach is integrating it with Azure Active Directory and then replicating users from our on-prem Active Directory to Azure AD, and from there on reusing Azure Active Directory user accounts for providing single sign-on to those public cloud applications. So in short, it allowed me to synchronize on-premises Active Directory users with the cloud, and from there on integrating with more than 2,500 public cloud applications. Now, when talking about Azure Active Directory versions, or SKUs as Microsoft calls them, we have three different versions. There's a free one, a basic one, and a premium one. Without going too much in detail, the premium one is the one that I would personally always recommend. Why? Because it not only gives you the most features, but it's giving you enterprise-ready features like multi-factor authentication, cloud app discovery, Active Directory Connect Health, and single sign-on without any limits. Now, when talking about Azure Active Directory, for about a few months now, Microsoft also has Azure Active Directory Domain Services, which is a little bit different than just Azure Active Directory. Azure Active Directory Domain Services basically means a full-blown Active Directory-alike scenario, but available from the cloud. So instead of building your virtual machines, deploying them as virtual domain controllers inside the Azure network, you can use Azure Active Directory Domain Services without deploying virtual machine domain controllers. So it somehow emulates an Active Directory domain without having the requirement to deploy Active Directory domain controllers. And once you have Active Directory Domain Services configured, you can join Azure virtual machines into this domain and get basic group policies applied. Now, quite important, it's not exactly the same as running your on-prem group policies. So it's more like a subset of everything that's available on premises. And then on top of that, admin users can sign in to Azure virtual machines by using the corporate Active Directory credentials out of the Azure Active Directory domain services again. Pretty interesting tool. Another feature or version that is available is Azure Active Directory B2B, business to business. Azure Active Directory B2B allows you to enable access to corporate applications from partner-managed identities. So two companies, two enterprise environments, actually exchanging user accounts, cloud-based user accounts. Each company federates once with Azure Active Directory, and each user is represented by a single Azure Active Directory account. And then business partners can exchange user accounts. It provides single sign-on credentials, and each environment keeps control of the accounts. Which ones are activated, how to create new ones, disabling accounts, removing accounts. And then at the last step, managing access to the applications is basically independent from the business partner's IT department. And then the third one that available right now is Azure Active Directory B2C. It's about the same concept as business to business, but this one is business to consumer. So Azure B2C, Azure AD B2C to be complete, is the secure, reliable cloud-based identity platform for consumer-facing applications, scaling to hundreds of millions of identities. And maybe you're using one of these already without actually thinking about it. So what it basically means is, as a company, as an organization, you build a web app, a mobile app, and then allowing users to authenticate by using their social media accounts, like log on with Facebook account, log on with Twitter, with a Google account. And out of Azure Active Directory itself, it provides you a free service. So there's a free tier up to 50,000 users per month, performing up to 50,000 authentications per month. And again, mainly built for mobile and web app applications. So that was a little bit about Azure Active Directory, the different versions, the different SKUs. Now, what it takes to deploy Azure Active Directory. In short, there are three ways to deploy it. The first one, it's by default hard-coded requirement when you're using Office 365, like Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, Skype for Business. Or you can also deploy it in a manual way from your Azure admin portal. And then the third option, without doing any specific configuration, is synchronizing from your on-premises Active Directory. So with that, I'm finished with the introduction on Azure Active Directory, and I would like to go over to the next video in which I will walk you through the integration of your on-prem Active Directory with Azure Active Directory in the cloud.